They say music is the universal language, but I often add grief to that list. We all understand it better than love. Sit with that. If all we've really ever known is grief, we don't know love until after we've suffered through grief. And even then, love in its most cleanest, proportional sense is unsustainable here. I recently read a short story about a boy named Michael Chen. The story, in my opinion, crystallizes grief in a beautiful way. A librarian finds Michael's old library card decades later, learns that he died, and realizes that he donated to the very library that raised him. The climax of the story highlights a wall of remembrance where hundreds of people leave behind their own library cards, affirming that they too were somebody after all. It's tender and it's human and it works emotionally well, but it leaves out the very active character here, and that's time distortion. Michael didn't need to be honored after he died. What he needed was support while he was still alive. And this is where so many of our grief stories become incomplete cliffhangers. Grief is not the arc of the human story. It's a process inside a larger one. You see, our most active storytelling pattern treats grief as the emotional endpoint where the character wasn't seen, they weren't met, but now, after they're gone or debilitated in some way, they finally get recognized. And that pattern offers catharsis, yes, but it obscures the real issue of timing. Michael's life wasn't unworthy. His dreams weren't misguided. His generosity wasn't invisible. The arrival time of support was distorted. And when that goes unnamed, grief gets romanticized as inevitable. And this happens in Charles Dickens' short story, The Signalman. And that story is available to watch as a short film because a few months ago, YouTube kept recommending it to me until I decided to finally watch it. The story is often known as a ghost story about premonition, madness, and inevitable tragedy. But beneath the surface, I realized it has something most of my video messages and my digital essays keep pointing at so clearly. It has more to do with a man who is positioned as a human intersection within a system that can't hear him. Everyday people are systems. It's important to know this. Not just those in high positions misusing and abusing power. And the signalman lives alone in a narrow cutting beside a railway track. And his job is to watch, to warn, and to prevent disaster. And yet, when he begins receiving these signals, these eerie warnings that something is off, there's no structure around him capable of responding in time. He asks the only rational questions available to him. Why show me a warning if nothing can be done? Why not tell me where it will happen? Why me? And some of you can relate to these questions. It became clear to me that this man is not afraid of death. He feels paralyzed by the suspension of the right answers. And the tragedy of the signalman is not that disaster happens, it's that the clarity arrives without a clean landing. The system around him continues to move at full speed in a distorted way while he's left isolated, self-contained, and slowly destabilized by the weight of holding awareness alone. Breathe with that, because this comes right back to time distortion. It's a structural barrier here, and it's not a cosmic mystery. Basically, we're taught to treat delayed fulfillment as divine timing, protection and redirection, fate, or some tragic but beautiful inevitability. But time distortion has texture. It has mechanics. It shows up as recognition arriving too late to nourish the body in real time. It's a collective avoidance pattern is what it is. When stories fail to name that pattern, they slowly and subtly train us to accept that as the ultimate truth, the inevitable truth. And what most people won't admit, partly because they don't see it, is that after death memorials often normalize what should be interrupted in real time. Stories like Michael's and The Signalman allow us to feel resolved without asking the harder question. Why was the support suspended until it no longer mattered? When grief is settled into the body without addressing distorted timing, it soothes without realigning itself. And as a result, we praise resilience, we celebrate legacy, and silently pass along that same delay to the next person and the next generation. You see, my work doesn't end at grief. It tracks the pattern beneath the grief. And as a writer, as a storyteller, I don't hold grief as the arc in my stories. I hold it as a signal, a process within a larger clarity arc. And that clarity arc is an invitation to explore what's delayed, what's held, who paid the cost, and why the pattern is still active. Especially in stories where someone is finally seen, but only after they're gone. Here's a transparent point. As of this message, I'm living through what I would consider to be a distorted delay. And this isn't abstract for me. In other words, provisions in my own life are suspended for no explainable reason. My creative containers, my writing, my books, my music, my digital work, they're not supporting me proportionately. They never really ever have. And I'm not saying this for sympathy. I'm naming a very specific pattern here. Because despite the suspension, my nervous system has found a second wind. And it's not hustle harder, but stand at the sharp edge of the clarity that I speak about with my breath intact, my body present, and tracking what's actually happening. Because the tracking itself is the work. But time distortion does affect the physical body. When support is delayed long enough, planning ahead turns into freestyling, and the body stays alert without a clean resolution. And this may end up being called burnout, but really it's the body's intelligence knowing it's being made to wait unnecessarily so. And when stories don't name that, this human experience turns into a moralized blame-shame game. Pay attention to that. This isn't about heroes or sheroes. It's about pattern realignment, facing and processing what's personally being avoided. I'm not positioning myself as a savior, and I'm not suggesting that you do that either. What I am suggesting is something simpler in concept, but it really is hard in practice. Speaking body level truth to survival avoidance. It's that simple. As well as naming the role of time in human suffering and challenging the prolonged delays masquerading themselves as destiny. When time distortion is challenged individually, it creates space for it to work collectively. Not in some instant magical way, although that's preferred, but in a structural, piece by piece way that becomes instantly repeatable over time. I care more about proportional patterns than the outcomes in this kind of a phase. I'm not chasing a dramatic turnaround. I'm committed to honoring patterns where support arrives when it can still nourish, recognition doesn't replace resources, coherence can be sustained, and people don't need memorials to prove that they mattered. Everything we live inside is shaped by a story. The way we talk about grief has to be told differently. Grief doesn't disappear when we name the distortion, but it can breathe deeply. And when it breathes, it stops training us to accept delays that never needed to last longer than their proportional timing. This is not easy work, but if you are benefiting from these messages, please engage. Let me see you. Let me hear you. Donation links are available. Become a subscriber. Share the messages while we're here to enjoy what's being anchored in real time. So, in the meantime and in between time, please be kind, be gentle with yourself in this right now moment and in the right now moments to come.